is the incredible creative team that has really rocked not just the comic book world, but every aspect of the publishing world with this amazing book. First up, the legendary writer, Mr. Tom Waltz. That is the incredible colorist, Luis Delgado. One half of the incredible team that brought the action and character to life, Isao Escorza. And the other half of that team, Isaac Escorza. Up next, the turtle killer himself, Mr. Ben Bishop. And ladies and gentlemen, last but not least, you may have heard of him. I've seen a few people in his line today. The one and only Mr. Kevin Eastman. Yep, jump on right there. Thank you, Kevin. Man, what a team up here, ladies and gentlemen.
Turtle killer.
The turtle. It's a lot of blood on his hands down there. I don't know, this is an interesting time having Ben Bishop up here. I think you've recently gotten a new license plate identifying yourself as a turtle killer.
TMNT killer, Bronco out there. Pretty proud of that thing.
It's awesome. Well, look, New York best time selling crew right up here, y'all. How does that feel to be on the best selling? So where to start? There's so much to unpack with this incredible series. I mean, some of this changed the landscape. Kevin, you've seen this thing through since the 80s, and just going back to the roots of the creative process that you started with Mirage. Maybe kick us off, talk a little bit about that creative process and get in the driver's seat on this one.
Well, my system of working is basically let everybody else do all the work, and I just take all the credit. Really good. So, going back to the earliest days of when Pete and I worked together, it was really a complete collaboration where it was one idea would lead to another goofy idea, and it would keep merging us two together as we sort of built out the original concept, the original origin. And our barometer was always laughter. It made us laugh, and it's something we loved and we enjoyed, and we wanted to see, because we wrote it specifically for ourselves. It wasn't really written for, like, hey, if we make them turtles, we'll sell more copies. Or take the approach this way or that. The fans will love it. It was really written for two original fans, which was Pete and I, so we really used that as the original source, the original passion, and then to try to pay respect and homage to so many of the people that we stand on the shoulders of that inspired us when we were kids. You guys like Jack Kirby and so many other writers and artists in the early days that would be the ones that would get in trouble because we'd be up in our room reading comic books instead of doing our chores or our homework or all those things. So it was sort of putting all those things together into one giant thank you note, which became the first issue of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. When we did the first issue, it was done to be a single issue because we never thought we'd sell enough of the first issue to do a second issue. And then this crazy thing happened is you guys bought them. And right here in the birthplace of the shows, which you guys know was all born in Dover, New Hampshire, right? So this is home turf. We own this country. This is it. So it was that was how the first issue started. We produced it, we sold it. We were grateful that we sold that many because we paid my uncle back, Michael Quinn, who lived here in Manchester, New Hampshire. He loaned us the $1,200 to do the first issue, and so we could pay him back. But then we started getting these calls of people asking for, well, when's issue 2 coming? And Pete and I were like, well, we never thought there'd be a second issue. We would never have an opportunity to do a second issue. And that's really where it all started. So the issues kept going and going, and selling. And to us, with starting issue 2, it was really a special moment because that was when the dream came true. For however long it lasted, Pete and I had finally stepped into or sat behind our favorite, again, our inspirations of the original comic artists and writers that inspired us. And we were living the dream, a childhood dream of writing and drawing comics for a living. That was That was the most important, most precious thing in the world. So I'm going to jump, fast forward to the birthplace of the Last Ronin. When Pete and I got to issue 11 of the Turtles, it was a point where we wrapped up a fairly large story arc, a couple of series of story arcs, where we sort of had the Turtles in Northampton, and we wrapped up a big moment. We had them all together as a family again, which included the one-shots on each of the individual Turtles. We kind of thought, like, looking down the road, where do we go from here? Where do we go next? And we said, well, let's look 30 years in the future, which is 1987, so we were looking into 2017. We said, what would be, say, the final Turtle story? That's it. The sort of issue 1 was the beginning. What's the final story going to be? And then this crazy thing happened, and that was also the same year that we started building the toys, the cartoons. The first cartoon series came out in 1987, that Christmas break. 1987, and the first toys came out in 1988, and then the time to do this story that Pete and I wanted to do just evaporated. We were now in full control of all things Turtles and having a great time, but the creative on the comics drifted away. We had this story that was sort of set aside, and then it was 5 years passed, 10 years passed, 20 years passed, and things have changed. So I'm going to jump way over to how the Last Ronin then was born. The guy on the other end here, the incredible genius, my best bud, Tom Waltz. Tom Waltz has accomplished something that very few people, very few writers in the world of comics have ever been able to take credit for, and that is writing 100 issues in a row of a comic book and writing 100 brilliant issues in a row. So with that foundation, that incredible foundation, working with these incredibly talented, Tom as a writer, we were blessed with so many gifted and talented artists that helped bring these stories and these ideas together. As we were heading towards issue 100, and I remember, I'm going to let Tom talk in a minute because it's fun. So I remember when we first started, it was like, well, if we just get 1 year out of this, it would be great.
Yeah, first it was just 4 issues.
Just
4 issues.
But I want to go back to the where it started at IDW. But so anyway, so just in the Last Ronin moment, and we'll go back a little bit. But on the Last Ronin moment, we were heading into 2018. We couldn't believe we were seeing issue 100 in our sites, and as Tom and I would have these chats of we'd have these blind out meetings, have the chats of well, where do we go after issue 100? And one day I sort of dusted off this idea that Pete and I originally had, and I showed it to Tom. And I said, what do you think about when we develop this? And this sort of taking the issue 100 and jump to another sort of Dark Knight version of the Turtles, sort of set within its own universe, leading towards the Mirage universe. Let's jump to that and bring that to life. And the coolest part about bringing that to life, it was very, nothing will ever replace what Peter and I did and how we worked, but Tom and I on this issue in particular, it was very much like those days with Peter where one idea led to another idea. We had this fun foundation, but there was a lot of things we needed to fill in. So one idea led to the next, and so it was a back and forth, right up until, would be changing and tweaking dialogue on a Sunday night before we could press on Monday. And so it was a real true birthing process, and quite exciting, but quite exciting. So that takes us to Last Ronin. We should introduce these guys.
Well, so for you guys that are jumping in here, tell us what it was like when you found out you were on this project. Because obviously Turtles and Ben, I know, seen pictures of you in the sleeping bag back in the day and standing next to Steve Levine in a foam suit. What was it like to be able to jump on board with this project and help bring this vision to life, you guys?
I say Ben. Okay.
That's for all of you.
I say it every panel, and I'll start to cry, and it's just like it's really crazy. Like I've always loved Turtles. I have sleeping bags that Steve drew, and I just always wanted to be, a part of that history, and to be such a big part of it, especially such a big book has been insane. It doesn't feel real. There's going to be toys, a movie one day. It just keeps going, but more so that we're able to tell new stories with those old characters and also some new characters.
Hopefully this is big new sleeping bags.
Yeah.
There are lunch bags.
Lunch boxes.
Yeah.
He said, what's that?
opinión, pero gracias.
Okay, so what was it like being able, when you found out you were on this project, this legendary piece here?
Pues definitivamente
Definitely
es la mejor experiencia
the
de
best
trabajo
experience ever
en la vida.
in their lives.
Además trabajamos con alguien Kevin.
They've never worked
El tamaño de
the
eso,
size of
equipo.
Kevin and 14.
Entonces fue increíble cuando esto comenzó, no sabíamos de dónde cayó.
They didn't know where it fell. It fell from the sky.
Ya con el paso del tiempo pues, hemos conocido la historia con más detalle.
So with the time, they understood the story better and every detail.
Pero sí ha sido una cosa increíble que
And it's been incredible.
todavía no nos cae el
That
20.
they haven't actually realized what's going on.
Pues,
Ah.
para comentarte, pues en un principio no
¿Quién?
teníamos ni idea
They didn't have any idea
de la gran obra.
how big it was going to be. They just do it as a project, and now they have grew them from the pit. How much you guys love it, and they thank you guys for everything, for the love.
I want Tom to go back to the beginning in a minute, but I'm going to fill in a few quick blanks here, which includes Lewis, and then we're going to get on this, because I want Lewis to speak too, but it's also, so a couple quick things, as Last Ronin came together, much as it was a happy accident for Tom and I to sort of start building the building blocks and sort of taking this to where we wanted to be Last Ronin, we were very lucky that the art team for this project fell together so beautifully and so perfectly. And that being that we, dear friend Andy Toon, who was originally brought on to be the series artist, had to step away from the project. And so we were both kind of scratching it, like, so looking, who do we choose? Who's next? What kind of artists do we work with? And we have to blame my wife for both of the artists involved. One was when we were working on an individual project called Drawing Blood. We were looking for an artist for that, David Avalone and myself. And my wife, Ben had just sent me a book called The Aggregate that he self-published. He grew out of that self-publishing Kickstarter program. And Courtney had said, well, what about this guy? He's pretty good. So we ended up bringing Ben in to do a main series artist on Drawing Blood. And so that evolution was, that track was going to be getting friendly with Ben. We were huge fans of his talent. And so back to the main artist for the Last Ronin, when Andy stepped away, I had a really, really good fortune with Heavy Metal Magazine that the Esposa brothers had done not only Tana, a 4-issue Tana series based on one of the most iconic heavy metal characters, but we also worked on a story together. It was an 8-page story for one of the issues that they wrote it out and they just brought it to life in such a brilliant way. We met, we saw at one of the Mamoli Comic Cons, and given my wife a beautiful drawing, and it was sitting, it was like on her wall in her office. And again, Tom and I were beating around artists, and Courtney said again, these guys are really good. I said, you're right. So I showed this to Tom, and Tom was like, dude, I'm all in with that. And then again, we had the Esposa brothers, and we knew we wanted that to be the Spirit Now, sort of our Dark Knight version of the Turtles. We talked in great detail about these flashback sequences, and kind of like we had Dark Knight on the one hand and a Batman Year One sort of on the other. And we said Ben Bishop would be the guy that could bring that to life so beautifully because he's so great at the acting and the emotion and the things. And so David and I literally took Ben, who's the owner of the property, we took our main series artists off our own book.
I made a joke when things were changing, and I was like, well, let me know, and I'm on page 100 of 209,000 or something. Way too busy and wanted it, but
yeah. He was in, and so then that's where you get this dreadful name, the Turtle Killers, because
I got them all except the last one.
The last one.
Yeah.
But no, it was just great. So it was a beautiful package, and then I think there was no other colors that Tom had in mind, except Luis Antonio Delgado, who colored not only the brother sequences, but Ben sequences, and with that looking into it. So that sets the stage how this amazing team came together.
What's it like for you, Luis?
Well, it was amazing from the beginning because I've been working with IDW and Tom for like 15 years, and I grew up watching all this stuff. I mean, I started with Ghostbusters, and Ghostbusters, as you know, did a TMNT crossover. So for me, that was the first time I did Turtles, and I was really excited. felt like a kid. I loved Michelangelo since I was a kid. I had my own skateboard that I never learned to use, and, but I had it. I bought it for my birthday, and I had it, and I used to band-aids on my elbows, pretending I was a turtle when I was a kid. There's I have pictures somewhere, but I'm never going to show them. But then it's called, then Ghostbusters started. And then there was an opportunity for the colorist, and Tom just reached out to me and told me it was a tryout. Do you want to do it? Of course I did. I stopped everything else. I went out, I think it took me less than 24 hours to send it back. And it was just waiting. I mean, it was painful to wait because he said that Kevin liked my stuff, that they had to get approval from Nickelodeon. And I was just like praying, let's hope we can do this. And Nickelodeon said yes. They approved me for the project, and then that's where I started working with the project. But the best part was, I remember when I was doing Ghostbusters and TNT, I had no contact with Kevin, just with Tom. And so I didn't actually know him. So now with with the Last Ronin, we started like exchanging emails, and he told me, "Hey, bro," and I talked to my friends like, "Kevin is my call me bro." Now I made it.
That's all. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about the book is how you all change. I mean, changing styles is classic Mirage, right? When you look at every artist and every turtle iteration and bringing that all together in the book to tell those different storylines, and at least the way you change colors from one story to the next, it's just, it's miraculous. And Tom, from a storytelling standpoint, I mean, obviously when you see what happens to the turtles, it hits hard. Anyone get some tears in your eyes and as you go, yeah. Splinter and Donnie Page, man, my two tops, Tom, y'all were killing me in there. You've done it to me twice. I didn't know you didn't now. What's going on? Talk to me about that process and how y'all decided how they would go out, because when you think about what Splinter's a really intelligent being, right? And then looking and charging into this. I was listening to the Turtle
Wait, has
Tracks
everybody
podcast.
read this book?
Too late.
If you haven't read it, go grab some copies off our cabinet and table. There's some there for you. But when you were trying to figure out how they went out, I think it was tough to watch that process. But I heard what you said on the Turtle Tracks podcast about it coming back to a revenge story, and in that space, like the mind just goes to a different world, right?
Yeah, and originally when Kevin and I started, we were really leaning really heavily into the Mirage. As a matter of fact, we thought this was going to be the end of the Mirage story, but it was pretty quickly we figured out this isn't a Mirage story, this is a whole new Turtle story. So, but we wanted to stay true to the core, even with the IW for all those years, as different as it is, at its core, it's still the Turtle story. Anything Turtles is about family. But what Kevin was really wanting us to lean into was that revenge aspect, which was a big key to the core to the Mirage series. And I guess in the movies to a certain extent was that there was this vendetta between these two families. I mean, there was just unsolved bloody business between two families that went way back, in their personal histories. And so what Kevin was saying was like, this is the culmination of that, and it has to be these two families still. So it happens to be the Last Ronin, and it happens to be the descendant of the Shredder. It was Roto. And so we knew that right in and of itself was just kind of a violent kind of way of telling the story. Even if there is no violence, just the idea that there's revenge that's waiting to happen, that there's vendettas that are being played out. So we knew that it can never be pretty. This was not going to be pretty. It wasn't this, as much as you want to talk about honor and redemption and all that stuff. Ultimately, it's like Hatfields and McCoys. And is there honor in that, or is it just two families that just maybe you should sit down and talk and figure this thing out? But they're not going to. They're way past that, to the point where in the story, actually, the hardest thing for us, it wasn't the death so much, because we talked about the deaths early on, and we kind of knew, we built around those things. And we said, what if they die? Donnie dies here. What if Raph would be the first one to go, because he's the hothead. He's just going to dive into this thing. And it was kind of one of those things where we weren't constrained. There was this was like Nickelodeon, to their credit, they said, go for it. We want you to tell a story, and it's going to be a violent story, and even more so, I mean, a lot of people will say, and I think you agree with me on this, Kevin, they'll say, those Mirage stories were so gritty and they were so violent. But they were, but I think sometimes people remember them even more violent than they were. Yeah. We actually ratcheted it up from that level, and they allowed us to do that. And it's hard. This is like a brand that goes across ages, you know, from little children to adults, and you don't. It's hard to kind of mess with a brand, you know, because people will say, "Oh my God, turtles are so violent," but they say, "No, this story needs to be right." Kevin had a vision of this. Let's just go and see what happens. So we knew the deaths were going to be fine. What was the hardest thing I felt like in the story was we had to find a way in all that violence to, in the end, tell the story that this was about a family, but it wasn't about that family. It wasn't about the family with the vendetta, the family with this long bloody history. It was about the new family that Last Ronin finds, and there's redemption in that. Like there's hope. At the end, there's hope in all this carnage. You know, and it was hard. It was hard for us. And the funny thing is, people will say, "Oh, I cried when I read it. How did you do that to me?" And even though we knew it and we wrote it, when those pages came in, it choked me in. You know, because it's like when you see it, you're like, "Oh my God, we did it. This is terrible." But I felt like, that felt like, okay, now it does this to me, and I've been talking to Kevin about this for 2 years, and it still hits me like this. What's it going to do to people outside? Now, what happened was thank you guys, by the way, way above and beyond anything we ever expected to happen in this book. But for us, the challenge was never the death. We knew that death was going to happen. What the challenge was for Kevin and I was like, how do we come out of this and the reader won't feel jaded, the reader won't feel depressed, they won't feel like all this for what? Because that to me is the point is, what is the point of revenge? I mean, what are you going to resolve? Nothing will get solved. And what are you going to have? More angry people that are going to want revenge later on. So in the end, when Kevin says, I wanted this Casey Marie character that was Casey's daughter, she's our linchpin in this. And in April to a certain degree too, but April's even kind of up in the past. Because if you read the book, she's still prepping for a war. She knows, we're still at war with the Foot Clan. And for Casey, the young ones are always getting pulled into these things. So what we wanted to do was, the most important thing when coming out of the story was that at the end, you realize, what was the most important thing? Was it the revenge? No. For Michelangelo, what was it? And if you haven't read it, close your ears. But it's like that reunion at the end, you know, whether you believe in heaven or Valhalla or whatever you want to call it, what mattered the most was he got to go back in a loving way to his family. And in the end, Casey Marie, you see, they're going to build this new family from love, from honor, and real kind of a real purpose. Doesn't mean you can't fight bad guys. I mean, comics would be boring. You could have bad guys to fight. But the thing is, like, maybe now it's not about vendetta. It's about justice. It's about moving forward. And I think they did a really good job of that. It was just kind of a coincidence. I really like this new Badgers movie with Robert Pattinson because that was the message in that movie. He was all about what he thought was, I'm vengeance, and I'm going to kiss. In the end, he realized all I'm doing is creating more vengeance. I mean, I'm moving this, okay. What was the most important thing? Lifting a little girl into the helicopter and saving somebody. And that was, I think, the biggest challenge for us. It was never about death. Sometimes the biggest challenge is about life. And that was what the book, to me, this book is about living.
Well said.
Writing right there too. There's so many iconic moments in this, and so much of it is so serendipitous, from Mikey being the first turtle to the last turtle. But the Fugitoids also held a really special place in the entire series. Talk a little bit about the Fugitoid, and that goes back to Gothic, right in the early days. And was that always the plan for them to be there at the end?
That was one of the beautiful things that evolved with Tom and I evolving the story. And it goes back to the original notes. It was great. Back in the early days, we kind of like handwrite everything, but then he started playing all this newfangled thing over computer. We started playing on the computer. So we would type everything out that we talked about and then add to it, and so it had this turnout. One I showed Tom. And with that, we kind of went through and we picked certain moments that we liked out of that we felt, well, this is a great day for how the ninjas were these zombified, half robot, half human sketchbook that he showed what the iPhone was going to be.
He was like, "Go watch."
Because first story, it's actually like 99.
Yeah. In a moment, how when April goes to in her lab, she wasn't real. And so, let's see. Percent they were there. Now we started recrafting and building a story. And so what it's going to look like, what time period we're going to have. We broke it up. It's like from something that we've talked about. Tomsky writing it out, that's when everything, you see the pieces start fitting together, and that's when you have those wonderful happy accidents where something you've had a splinter here, and you know it in your mind, and it's going to go here, but you're not sure where, but you know it's going to be here somewhere, and then as you arrive there, and it's almost like you're not as in control as you think you are in some cases, because it's almost right itself. So those moments were great, like that whole resolution and how that all came together. So many of the moments in that story were born out of that collaboration. And then, the best part of some of that stuff too, and I want to, again, tip it back to the artist, because it was, the story that we wrote, even some of the layouts we did, the stuff that I would pass off to Ben, and the stuff, especially with the Disclosure Brothers, because you might have noticed I don't speak Spanish very well. They don't speak English well. If they do, they're not letting us know yet. So I sent them basically, and that was the fun part. It's I sent them the layouts and we have a basic script, and they just saw it and they brought it to life in such an amazing way, because there weren't final designs or something, so there weren't final anything. So they were literally sort of handed us off, and they brought their A game to the creative development of that story. So that was really, when you talk about that and just so many looks that Ben brought to the story. Everything happened as it went along, and that's the beauty of the evolution. It's almost, I want to say it was like directing a movie, but in some ways it felt like so we.
It was probably the most organic writing I've ever had, because it would literally be like for the last second, things would change, because we just felt like there was something guiding us. I always use this is, if you've heard this from me before, I'm sorry, I'm repeating this on, but when people ask, how does the storytelling happen on third stories or whatever, and I always say, maybe seen that movie Heat, the movie Heat, and there's a part where Robert De Niro goes to the computer hacker guy, and he says, he gives him the bank schematics, like, shoot, you could build a bank with this. Like, where do you get this? He goes, it's just out there, man. You just gotta know how to grab it. I said, that's like everybody, I think everybody in this world has that radar. It may be for something different. My dad's a carpenter. He can take this table and fucking turn it into an even better table. I can make a bonfire with this table, but that's about what I can do. You know what I mean? But the stories, like, I don't have zero ego, but they talk about talent and stuff, like natural talent, but I think we just all have a radar, and that happens to be mine. I see those patterns, and Kevin's right there with me, and I think the artists see the same thing, and they just know how to render those things out, just like somebody can, like Pete definitely had a science mind, and it blew my mind when I saw the outline. Like I said, I started cracking up. I was like, none of this is like old-fashioned stuff now. He was way ahead of his time, you know. But I think we can all channel things. But it was funny in this case. It was kind of like simultaneously. Kevin and I were like just locked into this radar with the story, and we would both know. We would say, just not right, but we're going in the right direction. And there'd be a point where we'd say, that's it. Just leave it alone. Leave it alone. Move on.
So it really was. I mean, that's again just to repeat or sum up. It was. I did an afterword in the collective, and I just said it was a dream team, and it really was a dream team because it was like the perfect combination, the opportunities, the disclosures that just come off a project, and they were available. Ben and everybody, David, you know, of our own project, you know, we were able to pull Ben aside and then have him focus and become part of that story, and it was like, so many pieces fell together just so wonderfully organic and so perfectly to, you know, the whole team to make it happen the way it did. So that's what made it.
The whole thing was crazy collaborative because, as you know, it came out on a weird schedule, but we were literally working on it the whole time. They would come out, everyone except maybe Kevin would breathe for a day. I'd watch all the YouTube reviews and be like, oh, when do we start the next one? When do we start the next one? You go right into it, but that involved, you know, sets, locations, designs, and a lot of times there wasn't a lot of time for that. So Kevin's like, I've got here, keep going, go that way. And then you would send stuff to the brothers for like the big turtle tank and things like that. It was just so cool. And then Louise, we would be like, oh, that Sin City cover with the red moon was pretty cool. She did that in the Raphael scene. And they were like, okay. You're like, everyone was just on board for good ideas.
Yeah, it was great. And that's a, you know, the best part of that kind of creative process. You know, if you have an unfortunate experience as a creator working with someone that has too big of an ego to recognize a good idea, then the project's doomed. If you get a bunch of people that actually are smart and they're like, you know, dude, that's a really good idea, wherever it comes from, take advantage of it. That's what makes it beautiful.
You've never been afraid to steal.
You know, if these guys weren't here, Ben, Tom and I'd be taking all.
Yeah. Thanks. That's an incredible answer. To think that the Turtle Con could have been the first time. Bringing that branch of Mirage Studios and technology there. The show. Well, I want to turn it over to you all and ask a question. So if you've got a question, feel free to jump here in front of the microphone. Go ahead and start lining up. And as you're doing that, as we're looking forward, I know we've all heard about a little project called The Lost Years that's coming up. I don't know what can be said, but you know,
Let's just tell everything.
just tell everything.
This is the first real full Last Ronin panel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
This is the last one. First real last.
It's the first last one.
Yeah,
First
first
last.
So it's time to tell you everything that's done. Yeah.
It was all lies.
It was really great.
No, so what we're planning, and you know, I don't know if anybody here knows, but I also work at IW in an editorial capacity, so I'm kind of behind the scenes even in that fashion with this book. When Kevin and I first started, we had thoughts about sequels and other stories, but we just knew that we had to get Last Ronin done, we had to get it done right. And so every once in a while we'd be looking at that shiny thing down the road and we'd stop ourselves because we had other deadlines we had to take care of. But, you know, success certainly influences, you know, the trajectory. And so when the book came out, we knew stories we'd like to tell. We didn't know we had an opportunity or even a reason to do it. And then the thing just went bonkers and just sold like crazy. And everybody was freaking out. Then everybody's like, more, you know, and even us, because then it was something that we knew was important to fans, and we knew the stuff that we knew that you guys didn't know. So one of the things that, and there are, so I get in trouble. There are things in the works. Because one thing I can talk about right now is Lost Years. So what Lost Years is, we wanted to do something, and I think Kevin's aptly calling it like a Rogue One type story within this universe. So you know how you have Star Wars and the main movies, but then you have Rogue One is a Star Wars story. This is a Last Ronin story. So it won't be oversized like Last Ronin was. It'll be it's 28 pages each issue. It's a 5-issue miniseries. So what this is both a prequel and a sequel, all in one book. So what we're going to be able to do is tell the story that we hinted at through Kevin's flashbacks that he drew in the Last Ronin, which is when Mikey found out his entire family was dead and he also believed April had died, he kind of went on this weird vision quest. He went over to Asia. He went to look for Donatello and Splinter. They were obviously killed, and he thought, I'm just going to walk into the mountains and I'm going to die. Everybody's gone, I'm going to die. But what happened was, this is where we first kind of hint at this idea that there's these secondary mutations that are happening, that the mutations never stop. And so his body's changing, and his body wouldn't allow him to die, to the point where he finally said, well, you know what, I'm just going to stay here, I'll meditate, I'll just be by myself and figure things out. And as he does, that's when we kind of hinted at this idea that he starts to hear voices, he starts to keep hearing this nagging, which is that final revenge against the Footman. And so when he gets back and allows himself to be killed, but he can't. What he tells him, you gotta get up. It's time for me to train. It's time for me to be my father's journal, learn how to be this warrior. Across Asia, Europe, through Africa, and back to the United States. We're going to tell that story. We're going to see what happened tonight during that quest. So it's like a quest. Simultaneously in the present world, we left April and Casey Marie in a situation where they've resolved the problem of their choice. And you might as well there's 20 turtles in a little tank that they seem to be mutating or growing. So without spoilers, we have 20 turtles that are going, and it's going to be a story about what Casey Marie and April are moving forward from the end of the Last Ronin alongside those turtles. And we will see a 16-year story on their side. And what you will see is how Mikey Jackson worked, and then you will also see what happens in New York when he was done. That's the way. We're really excited. We brought in an artist that was many years at the original artist, and myself along. He's going to be drawing the main story. I should say the main story. He'll be drawing the past story, whereas then we'll be drawing the April story. So now I get the job for it. Bring it back. Yeah. So it's an interesting book because again we're dealing with those different timelines. Beyond that, I won't say anything past volunteers other than next week there's another surprise announcement that kind of relates to what we are doing for volunteers. So it's kind of come to the press. All of the books. And there's going to be a press release out there. So there's more information that will be coming. And over time, obviously, we'll be sharing some things of artwork, designs, stuff like that. But it's a really exciting time. And the key for me is that, it's exciting to talk about Fortnite Turtles, and I think it's going to be a big deal. I think people are really going to, I'm hoping this is kind of like a next generation of Turtles. But again, it's not Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's kind of like the Ghostbusters. I love all the new Ghostbusters stuff, but come on, you think Ghostbusters is big somewhere in the picture, right? You have all those four guys. Those are the Ghostbusters. And you can have thousands of them, but there's always those four guys that started it all. So you never go away from what got us here, and that's Michelangelo, Raphael, Leonardo, Donatello, Splinter, and their friends. So we've got it's challenging what we're going to do, but we're hoping that this is just the next step in building this new universe, but at the same time celebrating everything that's come before. And I think that's one thing we've done at IDW really well, and Ronin was just a continuation of that. Is we never forget where this comes from. We don't, if we change things, it's only because we were inspired by the stuff that came before. We never poo-poo anything, that came before us because it all matters to me. I think it all counts, and if you're sitting here, Kevin wants to say me and Peter were joking around, and here we are all these years later, and I think Turtles is about to hit another renaissance. We're like hitting the new Turtle era. Turtles are like Batman at this point at IDW for sure, but it's like becoming that big. And there's other things going on. And I think that's pretty to the fact that you get here and you last as long as whatever started it. It's such a strong
Yeah, that's gonna, my final piece is, these Sawyer brothers have to go to the Last Ronin University, and I'll let you know that.
Oh, yeah.
They're not done.
Yeah.
They're not done. We'll be back with the thing. We're giving them
Awesome. Well, what questions do we have from the audience? Okay.
With the turtles, especially. And things like that. You can probably how it's going to turn out. How do you guys to kind of just
For me, it's just like, this is what I've always wanted. Do my best job. Tried it. I've heard. Remember, this is what you've always wanted. Job. And so oh. Sort of kind of thing. Everything. Like, I love the iteration. This guy was so cool in this iteration. And I try to do that with like movie designs for and stuff.
It's kind of like a, so I was enjoying trading in cell phones. Just tons of rejection letters and we were doing something. Just having the passion and the rest of it, all kind of genre junkies, and I think that it's kind of a code the kind of thing that you spark will lead to another spark, what builds, that story concept and especially the age work. And even and he had this idea for his turtle universe, which is taking his faith. This whole other foundation, again, from multiple turtle universes, he carved out of this turf and then gave us a place where we could bring in stuff. And Tom's fresh idea, basically, guys, I can't help you. Or initially, that to me, the old guys got to raise these kids had already.
It's in the covers.
It's actually, I love what I do. It's not like that's another comment. I'm lucky. I got a page. Excited. I know what's for you guys. When we did Donatello's story, he sent me, I don't know how many pictures. Finding the right color to put on the uniforms. And because some of the characters, some of the designs have already been shown. And he gave me a link for books. I like it. A lot of job, a lot of hours, but it's actually something you enjoy. You feel happy. You just enjoy it.
Yeah, I say because
exciting to keep working and on this project because they're building this story. We're really excited to know what's going on.
What made them?
They grew up watching. I watch He-Man, Master Z. And that's how we start. Because it's really easy to work. He helped a lot with the sketches. It's a team that is so very lucky
Hemos trabajado con muchas personas
because they've worked with a lot of people before.
y me atrevo a decir
Yeah,
que
you can say that. I feel really and they want to do it.
Everybody just spent. So go right ahead.
Renaissance. The 90s one that's taken right from your comic. Right. Next movie for Ninja Turtles or time is right for a last movie.
I think. Stand by.
I think it's one of those things where the very fact that there is problems.
What would you advise give for
The an artist, pencil inker, sports star. Full time, you have a relationship or a family. It's only traced everything I stole from everybody. That's
Another question real quick, so we try to get that.
Hi. My question is, Michelangelo always the Last Ronin because we had Plaster Cafe. How was the last turtle?
this. Multiple different universes, multi-dimensional, become very common. That idea is Batman storylines or Spider-Man or stuff. So when we explored universes. A lot of times it was artists would bring us ideas. Framework. Or like Last Ronin Cafe was this great exploration.
But in particular to Last Ronin,
It was, to me, there was never a question when we sat down and we said, the Red Turtle Born is going to be the Last Ronin, not only because we loved the idea that he, in the perception of what we know as Michelangelo, he had the furthest distance to go. So he's kind of unlikely, but emotionally and psychologically, he had to go the furthest to arrive at this character. People would say, oh, it's going to be Raphael as the Last Ronin, or this. So in this particular multiverse of the Turtles, as Michelangelo the Last Ronin, there was never a doubt for us. So, awesome.
And it's 3 o'clock. We're getting a high sign from the folks that got to jump into the next room. If you want to hang around, we'll try to get your question. How about a big round of applause?